Hello everyone. Beautiful existence here in beautiful Sedona, Arizona. And we are going to talk about one of the other omnidimensional authors, and one of the first authors that I found while I was in my master's program at the Disembodied, or at the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics at Naropa University. But before we get into this wonderful omnidimensional author, poet extraordinaire, Arthur Rimbaud, we're going to do a Cannabis Tarot Oraculum reading. And today, this is very appropriate. 9 of Cups. And the bibliomancy tool that is in it for the 9 of Cups, I have Wish Come True. And boy, let me tell you, that is so appropriate when I am literally going into my Jupiter trine my natal Jupiter and my Venus trine natal Jupiter right now for the next 3 weeks. So I am super hyped. I went to the birthing cave yesterday. Oh my gosh, what an experience. I'm telling you, I was channeling so much. I purged so much last night. I was so sick in the hotel room. I probably have at least 3 or 4 or 5 channeling video or voice memos. So much immediately connecting here in Sedona, very much the area, having a lot of ancestors come to me and show me things. And my oldest son, Edge, was with me, and Eno, because I'm on a road trip here, hitting up some pretty sacred spots in the southwestern area of the United States. Sedona being the first here. And putting together these videos, just having as many things come through me, especially during this celestial activation time. And there was just a tremendous amount yesterday that I had come through. So 9 of Cups, very appropriate. Wish come true, absolutely. A lot of satisfaction here, just a tremendous amount of gratitude on my end for everything that is showing up right now. Very much abundance on so many different levels. So super grateful. There's so much heart chakra energy here. I was crying, I was laughing, I just had so much coming through yesterday. It's no wonder that I was just completely out of it by the time I hit the bed sheets. And just purged last night. Super big time. This place, very much fire earth energy. And where I was, which a lot of people know about the birthing cave, but I had the ancestors show me the death cave, and just the cycle of life energy that is kept there is very Saturnian aligned, and very, very sacred. And I had the ancestors show me a healing stick that I found. Edge was with me. He heard me tell him exactly where it was. We went back down into a different area that we had been walking before, and I took literally less than 10 steps into this area, and there it was. And he just looked at me. He's like, okay, just another thing in life that happens. This healing stick is very, very sacred. It's a generational healing stick, very apropos for a Saturnian aligned space for, birth and death and life cycle timelines, space. Very appropriate that it's happening, and that I got this generational healing stick here in Sedona. When Saturn's omens are happening this year, about the rings disappearing and the veils of reality lifting. But just really, like the 9 of Cups, content, very content. very much, you'll see this in the Cannabis Tarot Oraculum, with a breakdown of each one of the Cannabis Tarot cards and the different lineages through it. But realizing my dreams, being very joyful and happy here. So that's a really appropriate pull for this video. Anyways, I've known about Arthur Rimbaud for a while. Like I said, I found Arthur when I first had the Omnidimensional Authors calling to me, and I've made lots of notes this morning to kind of get reacquainted and remember the various reasons why he started showing up as one of the first omnidimensional authors for me. And like I said, I have a master's thesis from Naropa University's Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics. And that's when I found Arthur. And it was through the archives of Naropa from a lecture and a course that Allen Ginsberg had held in 1975 about Arthur Rimbaud. And the course is actually online. You can Google it and find it. And like I said, the Naropa archives have the full transcript of that course. So that's how I originally found him. And it was specifically his Lettres du Voyant that he sent to Disembodied and his friend Paul Domini. That was in 1870, I believe. Yes, in 1870 that Arthur Rimbaud wrote those letters. And they really speak to elements of being an omnidimensional author. And it was Arthur was the first poet writer that I started understanding that there had been other poets and writers and authors that had been receiving information from the ineffable and translating it like I had been doing, like I have been doing for many years. And it was through these Lettres du Voyant that I started realizing that, and the whole awareness of that we've been out here doing our thing, receiving information from the ineffable in a variety of different ways and translating it into a literary, piece or publication. It just started like flowing from there. So it really was Arthur that brought this about for me very quickly. Hannah Weiner came through, James Merrill came through, and a number of different writers and poets started coming through. And now here I am doing this series, creating this canon, recognizing our authorship, doing the research, finding the international laws that have attributed our authorship, our legal authorship and rights to the pieces that we translate since the 1920s. There's a lot here that's been existing for a long time, and that's why I'm bringing it to the literary community and to the world, that we have been doing this for thousands of years and that it is a new literary personage and genre to be acknowledged and to be researched and studied. So let me kind of get into a little bit about Arthur Rimbaud, because besides being a poet, besides being an omnidimensional author and describing his processes of being able to receive the ineffable and translate it from the late 1870s, from the late 1800s, he had a pretty interesting life in a lot of ways too. And that was one of the things that Allen Ginsberg talked about and referenced in his course at Naropa in the 70s. But so Arthur Rimbaud was born on October 20th, and very much that Libra Scorpio cusp, which I can completely, understand, having a Scorpio ascendant and tropical and having massive Libra in both my tropical and sidereal charts. I understand, that kind of give and take between balance and just going into the depths of the, darkness and coming out and transmuting it, translating it. which very much Rimbaud did throughout his life. He was educated, he was well educated, and he was published very early in life at the age of 15. In 1870, he ran away from school after one of his core instructors, Disembodied, had left the school because of war that was happening to go live with family. So it's about this time in 1870 when he ran away from school and did not have train fare and was thrown in jail in Paris, and that he wrote to Disembodied, and who gained custody of him and brought him back home. But when he went back home, he was disheveled. He was like a young, mad, genius. He let his hair grow out. He didn't care about his hygiene. He was very much stealing books. He was writing scatological poems, basically poetry about shit. And he was just completely becoming a recluse, right? But it was during this time that he wrote the Lettres du Voyant to Disembodied and Paul Damini. And this is where I started realizing that Rimbaud was actually an omnidimensional author. Other people were describing how he just started going crazy, and he was, like this young genius, and he was not keeping himself up, and he was completely different than he had been. And, he's like 16 years old at this time, right? 15, 16 years old. But he was writing in these letters to his friends this process of what it's actually like to detach yourself of ego, to open up to anything and everything, and access the ineffable, to receive it, to then be able to translate it and offer it to others for understanding. So in his Lettres du Voyant, some of the lines that he wrote to really speak to being an omnidimensional author, and they were the first lines that really made me realize that other authors have existed out there that were in these states that I have been, about receiving information from the ineffable. So Arthur wrote, quote, "I say that one must be a seer, make oneself a visionary," end quote. And he describes this through a long, prodigious process in a disorganization of the senses, and that you go through every possible ego constraint and drop every single aspect of who you are and any kind of your sensory input, and what he says, to attain the unknown. So these were, lines that many people, have referenced many times over, including Allen Ginsberg. And they were the first lines that helped me understand that omnidimensional authors have been out there for a very long time. It's no wonder that he was really at the forefront of spiritualism and the whole spiritualist movement in the mid-1800s. And he just ended up being, somebody who actually was writing the truth about what this was like. And unfortunately, he was at the very, very tip and head of it. And after he ended up passing away at the end of the 19th century and the turn of the 20th century is really when a lot of the rest of this started to come about, with more poets, more writers, the eventual international, law about mediums owning, their translation of the ineffable in the 1920s. Rimbaud had, a pretty active life for a while, especially during this time that he was probably channeling and writing about his channeling. One of the catalysts was when he wrote to poet Paul Verlaine in 1871. Because he was having a hard time publishing poems or getting any response from people. And so he was recommended to write to some noteworthy poets. to help guide him or give reception to his work. And Paul Verlaine invited him, to Paris and gave him a ticket to come see him. And Paul Verlaine had at the time like a 17-year-old pregnant wife. But Rimbaud and Verlaine started a very contentious, torrid affair for many years, from 1871 to 1875. And mind you, this is when, Arthur Rimbaud is like 17 years old, very much a minor. I know that there's different laws in France. There's a lot of people talking about how, the timing of everything that happened with the current French president in his life was possibly not a good time to, be a youth engaging in an adult, sexual affair with somebody. But, this is the 1800s, and, it was just what ended up happening. And it was very back and forth. They left each other, they got together, they left each other, they got together. Like, it was very well documented in some rights and very well known. In fact, it ended really with Verlaine buying a pistol and bullets and shooting at Rimbaud twice, in which he hit him once in the wrist, and Rimbaud didn't do anything about it, went in and had it bandaged up or something at a hospital. But very shortly afterwards, Verlaine and him again were in this like lovers tussle or whatever, and Rimbaud alerted a police officer to his fear of his safety or whatever, and Verlaine was eventually sentenced and sent to prison. When Verlaine got out of prison, he had converted to Catholicism, and by that time Arthur Rimbaud, for whatever reason, had completely shut off being a poet, writing poetry, having anything poetic come through him. He ended up, during this time when they were actually together, they have a very famous painting that they're both in by Henry Fenton Latour that was painted in 1872 called By the Table, which is so interesting and fascinating, right? You're talking in the mid to late 19th century, and there was so much going on during that time, especially in Paris with the Moulin Rouge, and just this whole, artists and poet, uprising that had been happening, and all of the gypsies, and there was just a lot that was going on during that time. So another reason why I believe that a lot of his correspondences, a lot of his works were kept, but they have this very famous painting that they're both in. And it was all these poets and authors standing and sitting at this table. But by the time Verlaine got out of prison, Rimbaud had moved on. He completely shut off his poetic life and license and started traveling the world, becoming like one of the first real coffee merchants, from northern African regions and the Middle East, just completely shutting off, his poetry, and no more writings, no more information about receiving or translating the ineffable. But since then, his affairs with people and, just his life, he was, like I said, considered an artistic genius, a savant child, a mad child, or teenager. He went traveling in his life. He ended up dying pretty early, before his 40s, of bone cancer. But he really just went off after that first time when his instructor Disembodied left his big brother from school. He just had something that I haven't been able to fully, find references for, and I'm sure it's out there. I'd have to go through a lot more archives. But there was definitely a turn of events that started happening for him where he was raising up in his abilities, his omnidimensional author abilities, and channeling and writing about the channeling and knowing how these processes feel and look and trying to describe them to other people. So yeah, this is the first one. Rimbaud is the first one in the canon that I designated. And I'm really glad that he is. There's a lot of his work that he never ended up doing. His life was very short. And I think that those, love affairs were just really a lot. And he ended up going in a different direction for the rest of his life. But he did help usher in many, many things. And even over 150 years later, here I am talking about it. He is a part of this canon with us because he knew and described these processes of what it is to relinquish yourself of your ego, of relinquishing yourself of any sensory understanding and attachment to embodiment to be able to access the unknown. So, thank you, Arthur. Lots of people have been able to know and see what it was that you were talking about and that you were doing at that point in your life all that time ago. And it's important, and you are part of our canon for that. So it is very appropriate that the Cannabis Tarot Oracle had the Nine of Cups come through, because I have a lot of gratitude for what came through yesterday, especially the healing stick, the generational healing stick that came through, and the crystals and everything that it showed me that I actually ended up finding at the Crystal Vortex right across the street. And so very much a magical place, very much a vortex around here of, being able to tap into and receive the different dimensionality and the ineffable in this space. So gonna go out and enjoy it and do it again today. Thanks for being here, everyone. And just a little bit more about Arthur Rimbaud and his entry and really helping usher in the Omnidimensional Authors canon.